Have you ever wondered why some women, when they choose solitude, suddenly seem untouchable? Mysterious, radiant, almost otherworldly? She is not louder than others, not more willing to perform her worth in public spectacle. Yet there is something about her absence from the noise that pierces deeper than any presence. Men notice it, though they may never confess it. Friends whisper about it, sensing both strength and danger. And deep inside the collective psyche, she becomes a figure carved from Jung's archetypal clay, the woman who walks alone, yet carries the weight of empires within her silence. In a world obsessed with display, with proving, with constant validation, her choice to withdraw becomes a rebellion. She is not isolated because she has been rejected. She chooses solitude as a deliberate act of power. And in doing so, she awakens both fascination and fear. For the masculine unconscious, trained to conquer, to possess, to define itself by the approval of women, she becomes the riddle it cannot solve. A man will ask himself why she does not bend toward the gravity of his attention. He will wonder what secret reservoir she drinks from, what inner flame sustains her without needing his fire. It is here that Jung's teaching on projection reveals itself. The man casts his anima, his inner feminine, onto her, demanding she reflect it back. But when she refuses, when she remains sovereign in her solitude, he feels the wound of separation. And that wound, unhealed, breeds obsession. Her silence is not the silence of absence, but of potency. She embodies the paradox that stillness is not weakness, but command. She holds her energy inward, and by doing so, she becomes magnetic without effort. The Stoics understood this long before psychology gave it language. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes invincible when it relies on nothing external. And so, the solitary woman becomes invincible to men who demand her submission, to cultures that demand her constant giving, to systems that reward performance over essence. She is invulnerable, not because she is without need, but because her needs are not bartered cheaply for approval. But here lies the danger, for men and for women who observe her. Solitude can be misinterpreted. The unawakened man may mistake it for arrogance, bitterness, or coldness. He tells himself she is lonely, that she secretly longs for rescue, that she will eventually bend. Yet these are projections of his own shadow, his inability to comprehend a woman who defines her worth without him. His ego insists she must orbit his sun, for to acknowledge her independence is to confront the fragility of his own selfhood. And so, he may mock her, dismiss her, or worse, chase her with fervor, seeking to break the spell of her detachment. To the awakened observer, however, her solitude is luminous. It is not isolation, but individuation, the Jungian path of integrating the shadow, of meeting oneself without distraction. Most people fear this journey. They fill their hours with noise, their hearts with substitutes, their identity with borrowed reflections. But she walks directly into the mirror of her own being. Alone, she faces the voices that others drown. She confronts the ghosts of old loves, the disappointments of family, the echoes of childhood wounds. She wrestles with the archetypes that whisper in her blood, the mother, the witch, the maiden, the crone, and she allows them to coexist, unmasked. And because she does this, she shines differently. She does not need to seduce with words, because her very presence is charged with the electricity of one who has tasted herself fully. Men sense this. They sense it in ways they cannot articulate. They dream of her, obsess over her, invent stories about her life. For in her solitude, she awakens their unconscious longing for the anima, for the sacred feminine they themselves have disowned. But she is not theirs to claim. The tragedy and the beauty is that the very thing they seek in her is what they must cultivate within themselves. You, too, may have felt this pull, either as the woman who chooses solitude or as the man drawn to her mystery. It is intoxicating, is it not? To know that the most irresistible power is not found in chasing and offering and bending, but in standing rooted, untouchable, self-possessed. The danger is not that she will be forgotten, but that she will be remembered too vividly, too painfully, in the silence after she has walked away. In solitude, she teaches. She teaches that love is not about possession, that attraction is not about strategy, that power is not about dominance. She teaches that the deepest magnetism comes from inner alignment, from shadow embraced, from ego dissolved into essence. She teaches that to stand alone is not to be without connection, but to be connected to something greater than the fleeting validation of attention. The woman who chooses solitude becomes both mirror and flame. She forces men to confront their shadow, to question their ego, to wrestle with their anima. She forces women to reconsider the cost of people-pleasing, to ask whether external validation is worth the price of inner silence. And in this way, she does not just live alone, she transforms the very meaning of connection. Her solitude unsettles because it dismantles illusions. The illusion that a woman's value is measured by her availability. The illusion that her worth rises and falls with the presence of a man beside her. The illusion that love must be proven through constant giving, constant sacrifice, constant performance. When she steps away from these scripts, she tears the veil from the collective unconscious, exposing truths most would rather leave buried. Jung would say she embodies the archetype of the self, complete, whole, indivisible. And to those who live fractured lives dependent on the gaze of others, her wholeness feels almost threatening. Notice how the world reacts to her. Friends may tell her she is too selective, too cold, too distant. Families may warn her that time is running out, that she will regret her independence. Men may oscillate between desire and disdain, drawn to her flame but resentful of its heat. Yet beneath their words lies a single fear. If solitude can be chosen and cherished, then the entire economy of external validation collapses. What becomes of seduction if absence is more powerful than presence? What becomes of control if silence commands more than words? There is an old truth buried in mythology. The sacred feminine was always dangerous to patriarchal order. From Lilith, who refused to lie beneath Adam, to Artemis, who wandered the forests alone and untamed, to the mystics who refused marriage in pursuit of spiritual union. The solitary woman has always been both desired and demonized. She is the embodiment of mystery, and mystery cannot be governed. Jung taught that mystery activates projection, stirring the unconscious to fill the gaps with longing, fear, and fantasy. And so, she becomes a canvas for the anima, a living mirror for the unlived feminine in men's souls. But solitude is not without its shadows. To walk alone means to meet loneliness head-on, to confront the ache that comes when no one reaches for your hand in the night. It means facing the inner voices that whisper, "You are too much," or "You are not enough." Many flee from these voices by burying themselves in relationships, by clinging to companionship as distraction. Yet the woman who chooses solitude does not flee. She stays. She listens. She endures. And in enduring, she becomes forged. Like tempered steel, she emerges stronger than those who avoid the fire of aloneness. The Stoics would call this resilience. Epictetus taught that suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our interpretations. And so when solitude comes, most interpret it as loss. But the awakened woman interprets it as freedom. She reframes absence into presence. Presence with herself, with her spirit, with her unmasked soul. This reframe alters her aura. She carries herself differently, not hurried to please, not frantic to prove. She becomes measured, deliberate, enigmatic. And what happens to the man who encounters her? At first, he may dismiss her. He may tell himself she is bitter, unavailable, impossible. Yet he finds himself circling back, unable to forget. For the unconscious does not forget what the conscious rejects. In dreams, in stray thoughts, in moments of silence, she returns to him as symbol. She becomes the anima knocking at the door of his psyche, asking him to integrate his own disowned feminine qualities, his intuition, his vulnerability, his capacity for nurture. If he resists, obsession deepens. If he surrenders, transformation begins. Thus, her solitude becomes alchemy, not only for herself, but for those who dare to face what she mirrors. And for women watching her, the lesson is equally piercing. How many times have you silenced your needs in order to be accepted? How many times have you mistaken sacrifice for love, availability for value, compliance for worth? When you see her walk alone, untouched by these chains, you are reminded of your own forgotten power. It may frighten you because her independence challenges the roles you've been taught to play. But it may also awaken you, stirring the whisper that perhaps you too could step away, could reclaim yourself, could taste the dangerous sweetness of solitude. There is, of course, no guarantee that solitude will protect her from longing. She may ache for companionship, for intimacy, for touch. But here is the paradox. Because she does not seek to fill the void with just anyone, her eventual connection, if it comes, is purer, deeper, freer. She has not sold her soul for company, she has preserved it for union. And should union never arrive, she remains whole regardless. This is the essence of sovereignty, the capacity to desire without dependency, to connect without collapse, to give without losing oneself. So the mystery of the woman who chooses solitude is not merely that she is alone. It is that she reveals how false our definitions of love and power have been. She exposes the weakness of men who cannot endure a woman beyond their control. She exposes the fragility of systems that demand female sacrifice as proof of worth. And most dangerously, she exposes the possibility that happiness, freedom, and radiance may be found not in being chosen, but in choosing oneself. Her solitude is not empty space, it is a cathedral. Within it, she builds altars to her own becoming. Each hour alone is not wasted, but consecrated. Each silence not absence, but prayer. Most fear solitude because it reveals too much of the self they would rather not confront. In quiet, the shadow speaks the unresolved griefs, the unloved parts, the fears of inadequacy. Jung taught that the shadow cannot be annihilated, only integrated. The woman who chooses solitude dares to sit with it, to invite it to her table, to listen without flinching. And because she does this, her solitude is not loneliness. It is initiation. The paradox is striking. The more she embraces aloneness, the less alone she becomes. She finds herself accompanied by ancestral voices, by archetypes rising from the depths, by the subtle whispers of intuition that so many drown in the clamor of relationships. Her solitude sharpens her perception. She sees patterns in human behavior, illusions in the games of attraction, fragility in the masks of ego. And men sense this in her. They sense that she cannot be easily deceived, cannot be lured by shallow gestures, cannot be kept by empty promises. This unnerves them, for many men are accustomed to conquest. Yet here stands a woman who is unconquerable, not because she resists, but because she does not need what they offer in exchange for herself. Have you noticed how silence can unnerve even the strongest? A man who thrives on dominance grows restless when his words fail to provoke. He raises his voice, grows dramatic, amplifies gestures, yet she does not break her silence. It is not passive resistance, but sovereign presence. Silence in her hands becomes a weapon sharper than any accusation. And because men are trained to measure worth by reaction, her lack of reaction forces them inward. They begin to hear their own echoes. They begin to confront the emptiness they had hoped her validation would fill. This is the secret torment she awakens. She does nothing. And yet in doing nothing, she forces them to face themselves. But solitude does not only sharpen her defenses, it refines her desire. She no longer seeks validation through attachment. She does not cling to companionship as proof of worth. She waits, not passively, but with discernment. Should a man approach her, she will not ask, "Does he want me?" but "Does he honor me? Does he meet me at the level of my soul?" This shift alone dismantles centuries of conditioning. For most women have been taught to measure themselves by desirability, to accept any form of attention as fortune. But she knows better. She knows that attention is not devotion, that desire is not respect, that possession is not love. Men who encounter her often find themselves divided. Part of them longs to conquer her mystery, to solve the riddle of her independence. Another part of them feels threatened, sensing that to enter her orbit requires transformation. And transformation is never easy. Jung would call it individuation, the process of meeting the unconscious, of reconciling anima and animus, of dissolving the false self. She becomes the catalyst, not by intention, but by essence. Her solitude signals that she will not be used as a mirror for unfinished egos. If a man wishes to stand beside her, he must first stand beside himself. And so she awakens obsession, not by seduction, but by refusal. She does not promise availability, and precisely because of this, she becomes unforgettable. A man may walk away convinced he has conquered, but in the quiet of night, she will return to him as a haunting. He will remember the way she looked through him, the way she did not bend, the way her silence echoed louder than his boasts. He may chase other women, seek easier victories, drown himself in noise, but somewhere in his psyche, she will remain. She becomes not a memory, but an imprint, carved into the architecture of his desire. For women watching her, she is a mirror too. She forces them to ask uncomfortable questions. What if solitude is not a punishment, but a gift? What if the deepest wounds are healed not in the arms of another, but in the sanctuary of one's own presence? What if attraction need not be manufactured, but arises naturally from the wholeness of self-possession? These questions unsettle because they threaten to undo the very foundation of societal scripts. Yet to watch her is to witness what happens when a woman is no longer afraid. She is not afraid of nights without company. She is not afraid of whispers that call her too much, too little, too strange. She is not afraid of her own shadow, for she has broken bread with it. And because of this, she is radiant in a way that cannot be imitated. Radiance that is not performed, but born of integration. Radiance that is not borrowed, but forged. Radiance that no man can grant, and therefore no man can take away. There comes a point when her solitude ceases to be misunderstood as withdrawal and begins to be recognized as presence, an intense, undeniable presence that unsettles the shallow and strengthens the deep. She carries herself differently, not because she tries to, but because something within her has shifted. Solitude has taught her to belong to herself. And in a world that thrives on dependency, this belonging radiates as both allure and danger. Men who cross her path often feel an immediate dissonance. On the surface, she may seem gentle, approachable, even tender. But beneath, there is a stillness they cannot penetrate. Their usual tactics, flattery, dominance, displays of power, fall flat against her quiet gaze. It is not that she dismisses them, it is that she does not need them to validate her existence. Jung would call this the withdrawal of projection, where other women may unconsciously carry a man's anima for him, reflecting his inner feminine back to him. She refuses to play that role. She does not become the vessel of his unfinished self. And so he is left staring not into her eyes, but into his own emptiness. This is why her solitude awakens obsession. Not because she seeks it, but because she denies the easy mirror. To a man accustomed to women bending, adapting, surrendering, her resistance to assimilation feels like rejection. And rejection, to the fragile male ego, is intolerable. He cannot fathom that her distance is not cruelty but sovereignty. He cannot accept that she is not withholding affection as punishment, but simply existing without need of his validation. His mind twists this into a wound, and the wound festers into fixation. He finds himself haunted by her absence, more powerful than any presence. Yet this is not merely about men. For other women, too, she becomes a provocation. Some envy her freedom, while others critique her independence, insisting she must be hiding secret pain. Society has long feared the woman who stands alone, because she represents a threat to every system built on female compliance. If one woman can find fulfillment without sacrificing herself, what stops others from following? This is why cultures have often painted solitary women as witches, rebels, or outcasts. To choose solitude is to reject the script. To reject the script is to expose its falsity. Still, she is not immune to longing. She feels the ache of desire, the yearning for intimacy, the hunger for touch. But she refuses to feed these hungers with counterfeit nourishment. She does not settle for half love, for partial presence, for fractured devotion. She would rather walk alone in integrity than be accompanied in disconnection. This choice is what makes her magnetic. The very act of refusing what is shallow draws deeper forces toward her. It is not a strategy, but an alignment. The Stoics would call this mastery. Seneca wrote that the greatest wealth is a mind content with itself. And she has learned this truth, not in theory, but in practice. Her solitude has stripped her bare, removed the illusions, tested her endurance. She has sat with nights of emptiness, mornings of silence, afternoons of doubt. She has felt the cold weight of being misunderstood. Yet through it all, she discovered that nothing external defines her essence. Not a man, not a title, not approval. Her essence belongs only to herself. And this is what gives her a strange, untamed beauty. She cannot be owned. She cannot be bought. She cannot be broken by abandonment because she has already befriended solitude. Abandonment is powerless against one who has chosen aloneness. This is why she is both desired and feared. Men desire her because she is not desperate for them. Women admire her because she embodies the courage they secretly crave. But both men and women may fear her because her existence calls into question the lies they have built their identities upon. You who listen now, do you feel the unease of her presence? Do you sense the danger of her choice? Perhaps you feel drawn to her, imagining what it would mean to walk with such sovereignty. Perhaps you resist, telling yourself she is exceptional, not like you. But here is the truth. Her power is not exceptional. It is available to every woman who dares to stand alone, who dares to meet her shadow, who dares to declare, "My worth is not negotiable." The mystery of the woman who chooses solitude is not that she is without need, but that she refuses to betray herself to meet those needs. This refusal becomes the very thing that makes her unforgettable. In a sea of performers, she stands still. In a world of compromise, she chooses integrity. In a culture of noise, she carries silence like a crown. And in doing so, she becomes the rarest of figures, a woman who is free. Solitude, when fully embraced, transforms from a condition into a power. It ceases to be the absence of others and becomes the presence of oneself. The woman who chooses solitude embodies this transformation. She is no longer defined by what is missing, but by what is complete within her. Jung would say she has touched the self, the archetype of totality, the union of conscious and unconscious. To the uninitiated, she seems distant, but in truth, she is more present than most, for she has united with her own depths. This is why her gaze unsettles. It is not filled with hunger, nor with the restless search for approval. It is steady, calm, almost eternal. Those who look into her eyes may feel seen in ways they did not ask for, and this unnerves them. For she does not project onto them, nor allow them to project onto her without resistance. She does not carry the weight of their anima or their shadow. She stands as herself, unmirrored, and that is what makes her so elusive. Men cannot find themselves in her reflection, and women cannot anchor their insecurities in her compliance. She is a free figure in a world addicted to chains. Yet solitude is not a path for the faint of heart. It is a crucible. Within it, every unhealed wound comes forward. The nights can be long, the silence is deafening. There are moments when even she questions her choice, when the temptation arises to return to the noise, to fill the emptiness with companionship at any cost. But each time she resists, she deepens her strength. Each time she holds her ground, she sharpens her spirit. It is not that she does not feel loneliness. It is that she does not let loneliness dictate her decisions. This discipline becomes her crown. In relationships, this crown manifests as discernment. She does not confuse desire with devotion, nor attention with love. When someone approaches, she measures not the intensity of their pursuit, but the depth of their presence. Does he come as a whole man, or does he seek to outsource his wounds onto her? Does he approach her solitude with reverence, or does he attempt to dismantle it for his own comfort? These questions are not asked aloud, but her spirit knows the answers. And because she does not fear being alone, she has no reason to compromise. This terrifies those who rely on power dynamics. For many, attraction is a game of leverage. Who needs whom more? Who gives less to maintain control? But with her, the game dissolves. She does not play by the rules of scarcity. She does not need anyone more than she needs her integrity. And so the usual strategies, withdrawal, manipulation, seduction, fail. A man may withhold his attention, expecting her to chase, but she will not move. He may attempt to provoke jealousy, expecting her to compete, but she remains unmoved. He may attempt to dominate, expecting her to surrender, but her silence is impenetrable. It is here that Jung's shadow comes into play. For the man, her solitude awakens the shadow of abandonment, the wound of rejection, the fear of insignificance. Instead of facing these shadows within himself, he may attempt to project them onto her, labeling her cold, unfeeling, arrogant. But projection cannot change reality. The truth is that her independence has revealed what he has long ignored, that his worth must be found within, not borrowed from her. If he cannot face this, she becomes the ghost he cannot exorcise. And for women, her example awakens the shadow of compliance. Many realize how much of their life has been spent performing, being agreeable, being available, being chosen. When they see her unafraid of solitude, they feel both admiration and resistance. Admiration because she embodies what they secretly long for. Resistance because to admit her freedom is to admit their own chains. But the shadow cannot be avoided forever. The more they deny it, the more her image returns, as a question they cannot silence. What would happen if you stopped performing? Her mystery, then, is not supernatural. It is psychological. It is the natural consequence of individuation, of shadow integration, of self-belonging. What seems like enigma is simply the absence of dependence. What feels like danger is simply the presence of authenticity. Yet because so few live this way, she appears extraordinary. She becomes myth, muse, obsession, not by effort, but by essence. And the essence is this: she is free. Free from the demand to prove, to bend, to be chosen. Free from the fear of nights alone. Free from the tyranny of external validation. Her solitude has made her sovereign. And sovereignty, once tasted, cannot be surrendered.